how should we design learning experiences that are engaging and relevant?
When I think about any experience, right, we think about how we, what we want to know and understand, and how we want to know it and experience it, and how we want to feel about it in the experience. And so that, in my mind, is what shapes the activity. So I think about our students. I think about the standards that we're called to, right? That's pretty important. And that answers the question for me, what is it that we want our students to know? And so that needs to be a part of the conversation. And then the next question that comes to mind is, how do we want them to think, right? And because that really is the way that we create relevance and engagement, because we're pushing their thinking there.
So how do you support a student's thinking?
You start with what they bring.
Okay.
So asset, right? You start with student's asset. You start with your end game, where you want them to be, and then you look for, look for, scour, steal, borrow activities that give them opportunity to one, see how that thinking happens, and practice it with feedback. So it's such an iterative process, and it's a process that I think is framed but not controlled. So when teachers, show up to think about, how they want students to think, they've got to come with some sense of framing, but a pretty large open space for what students bring to the table.
I love that idea of framed but not controlled. Yeah. What do you feel like is a good frame for teachers to use with kids?
You know what? I really like the way that we frame culturally responsive education at APS, right? So our CRE themes, relationships, asset-focused factors, vulnerabilities, identity, rigor, and engagement, right? And so those are that. I think that's a great frame. So when I interact with the student and the standard and where I want them to go, I have all of those things as the backdrop. It's like the music to the party, right? So it's always playing in my background, and it shapes and helps me then frame how we provide experiences for kids.
And so it kind of gives you that common language as well.
You bet.
When you're talking with teachers and leaders.
The other frame is, traditional things, that you understanding by design, EPD, backwards planning, whatever lesson approach people bring to teaching students. I think, and that's just it. It's having common principles around it and common practices, but the framing and the format that needs to be nuanced, because our students are very different.
And so you feel pretty comfortable in sort of having the frame, but then letting the teacher really sort of use that art of teaching in order to really support the kids.
It's sort of a cascade there, right? So I want students to bring their assets to the table, just like I think teachers need to be able to.
That's awesome. So I'm interested, you answered this question extremely well. What do you feel like is a question that you are constantly asking? One that you feel like we as a system, as a group, need to be answering?
Yeah. I think the question that I continuously ask myself, and I wonder about our system, is, do we really mean all means all? Do we really mean that? Do we mean every single student with every single strength and asset and every single challenge or vulnerability? Yeah. Do we really mean that? Yeah.
And do you have an answer? Do we mean that? Do you mean that?
I mean that. I do mean that. I think our system doesn't yet mean it.
What do you think would it take for us to really make good on that promise of all means all?
Vulnerability. Hitting our ground truth from a very real space. And in the past, we've talked about our concept around second job, where you come and you fake it, and you talk about all the things that you know and don't yet deal with the things you don't know. It's second job of making people think you know everything.
Sure.
It's taking the second job off and showing up as learners, modeling that space at every level in our district, and a relentless pursuit of all means all. So sometimes that means adults are uncomfortable, and that's okay, because if that's what it takes for all means all, then that's what we got to do.
Yeah, so almost the all includes the adult learners in the building.
Yes.
It includes all of the support
Yes.
staff, where we are constantly pushing ourselves to know more and to be able to work better for outcomes for kids. That's awesome. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben.